All right, good afternoon and welcome viewers to the City of Santa Monica's Calling All Trades, Jobs for a Green Economy speaker series. My name is Drew Johnstone and I'm with the city's Office of Sustainability and the Environment. And I'm really pleased to co-host this series with Michael Jackson, who's also with the City of Santa Monica. And today we are really pleased to have Stuart Cooley, who I'm really glad to have known for probably over a decade now, when he worked for the City of Santa Monica, and I was a consultant in the private sector working on solar projects. I really learned a lot from Stuart, and really interested to hear about his career journey today. And he will be talking to us about jobs in the renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors, and why it's so important for a green economy and a sustainable future. So without further ado, hello, Stuart. Love for you to kick us off. I think you have some slides for us. Did you want to pop them up now or in a minute? It's up to you. You have control, so you can.
I can start
choose
now.
your destiny.
Hold on, give me a moment as some mechanics involved here. Sorry, here we go. Do you see what I see?
Perfect. Yep, we see your big resume.
That's how I figured I'd start it off, because your resume is your face forward when it comes to seeking a job and professional, basically a blueprint of your professional background, and that is what will determine, in many cases, the chance to have an interview. The interview is also important, but if you don't get in the door with a good resume, then you're kind of stuck. So I'm sharing a lot of personal information here, but I'm okay with that. If anyone wants to contact me directly or ask questions, that's fine. I'm showing you just one version of a resume. It's not as pretty and colorful as many resumes could be, but these days, when you're searching on the internet, a plain Jane resume with little formatting is a really good idea, because many job sites are going to look to parse your resume into the different blocks, and they'll save you a whole lot of time rather than having to fill out your whole career every time you look for a job. So I thought I would share how it can be done. You just put your name and you minimize your address. Just a city is usually good enough, but your phone number is critical. And then of course, an email address is critical. I suggest putting education first. I think it's important. It often is the background. But even though that might be education from school you've been to years ago, you still want to put the schools that you've been to in reverse chronology. So put the newest first is my little notation there. And then you put anything else of importance in terms of education. In some cases with my students at the community college, I would be taking professionals and teaching them solar. They would put the most current work that they did, which was learning about solar first, and then they could have their other credentials follow that, which are even more impressive in terms of time spent in school. The credentials is an optional. You can put it here, you can put it towards the back of the resume, but then again, you want certainly want professional experience or work experience. And my resume goes on, sadly, for probably too long, a couple pages. 11 different positions. I don't know if I'm proud of it. It either means that I'm really good at getting jobs or that I'm often getting let go. But since I wasn't fired, I think it's a better picture for me. Anyway, and so in the descriptions too, you want to be able to make sure keywords are both bolded so people can see what you want them to see first. And then also just the choice of words is important, because many times a resume gets parsed by a computer and it's looking for keywords. So that's where the credentials are handy, because the acronyms and the credentials, for example, in mine, LEAD is an important one to have. LEAD stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, which I do show you on the resume if you don't know. But if you're searching for a job that requires that LEAD background, then you have it front and center on your resume. Sorry, I'm trying to advance here. There we go. When it comes to jobs, the good news is there's constant headlines showing how there's a focus on jobs, a focus on green jobs. And I just thought I'd pull this fairly current headline off the internet showing you, reminding you that the government from the federal level on down is looking to promote infrastructure jobs. Infrastructure jobs are often the blue collar or trades related jobs. So this is a good time to be looking for work. And I think it's going to be accelerating quickly in terms of opportunities. So if you're looking for work, this is a good time to have that resume ready, for example. And we want to understand how that infrastructure bill, $1.2 trillion, unfortunately, you don't get it all. It does end up, sorry, I was having troubles advancing here. This is a graph that shows you, I went a little deeper dive into the jobs related specifically to energy efficiency, one of the areas I teach in. And what I found from the International Energy Agency, federal agency that covers all these kinds of things, is that I searched on energy jobs and I found how much or how many jobs there are for every $1 million invested. So you can even do the math from the $1.2 trillion that are being invested and realize that the infrastructure bill is going to translate to a whole lot of new jobs. And this is the prediction of how they will basically be spaced out over the next few years. I highlighted the top because I have utility background. For me, that's important to know that there's electric utility sector jobs. The starred one in the middle was because I wanted to remind people that solar PV is on the construction side where a whole lot of work is being done. The color coding is described below where it's showing you it's a cross or a mix of both construction jobs and manufacturing related jobs, which is important. And manufacturing has been overseas for the most part, but we're looking to bring a whole lot of manufacturing jobs back to the United States. And then all of those in green down there are a little more focused on the green building side and climate mitigation side. I put a little reminder there that electric vehicles is a part of the future. So if that's something you want to get involved in, that's a growth area. And then the big orange area is showing you two rather big areas that could be considered one, and that's building efficiency retrofit and efficient new buildings. So building related energy efficiency is huge when it comes to these new jobs. And this is, evident from this slide. So I thought that would be useful as well. I took this also from a solar market report cited below. And it's just a reminder that over the next 5 years, we're expecting huge growth in the solar market, as the last slide basically indicated. But how much we're talking about, it's in the billions of dollars, that by 2026, $223 billion will make up the global solar energy market. Now that is global, which is good news and bad news. It's not just the countries, but it does mean that the jobs are anywhere. And so if you ever had thought about traveling, now's not a bad time to look to possibly getting a career overseas. The fact that it's growing at a CAGR down there at the bottom, it tells you the growth rate of this industry is 20.5%. CAGR stands for compound annual growth rate. And I just thought I'd take this moment to teach you a little bit, a fun fact about growth rates, that there's something called the rule of 70. And whenever you hear about something growing at a certain percentage, you can do a little trick. You take 70 or 72 if you're going to be a stickler, and you divide it by the number of the compound annual growth rate. The growth rate here was 20.5, so I round it down to 20 to make the math easier, because I'm just looking for an approximate. And what it's going to tell me is the doubling time. In other words, how many years before this industry doubles? So 70 divided by 20, I think it's 3, remainder 10. 10 is half of 20. So basically we're talking about 3.5 years before the number of jobs doubles in the solar industry. And I happen to know that California recently had 200,000 jobs in the solar industry. 200,000 nationals. So there's correction there, but 100,000 in California. So we had almost half the market, and that's going to double by the year 2023 and double again by 2026. So that is a huge growth in this industry. Not that I'm pushing solar, but I just use this as a good indication of where jobs are, because I think this is a great and has always been a big future in solar. When I was 14 back in the 1970s, I thought there was going to be a big future for solar. I was right. I was just a little bit ahead of my time. So you have to be careful not to guess too early as to when things are going to get going. So my advice when it comes to, what do you want to be? Often you get that question, especially if you're in school or something like that. And I would suggest you reframe the question to what do you want to know? Because what you want to be is a job that may not even exist yet. We'll talk for a moment about different words used in job titles in the green industry. And you'll see that there many times the jobs are jobs that don't exist yet. So how can you decide what you want to be when what you want to be doesn't even have a name to it yet? So my suggestion is know what you want to know and then go out there and learn it. And realize, of course, that Google is your friend, not just for finding pictures of cats, but finding any information that you want to know, any field of endeavor you want to get studied up on. A lot you can learn. And then when you want to really get professional and get credentialed, then you fine tune it and you go after a course and get that under your belt in terms of knowledge base. I'll give you some other free advice, and that is that you get your soft skills sort of down and clear, be able to do a meet and greet, make eye contact and speak clearly. Not, try to do it all the time so that even in social situations, you're not uncomfortable. And then of course, in a professional situation, then it becomes easy because it's just the way you meet and greet people. Avoid unprofessional language. I got schooled in this the hard way from a professional recruiter who asked me if I was a professional. And I said, yeah. And that's not the right answer. The answer is yes, because yeah is not really a full word. So always be smart about your language and how you speak. I use the example of obviously don't use any curse words in your discussion, even though they may be something that you are commonly use on the job site or at your desk when working. So, keep it professional. Always try to appear confident. Sometimes saying less is better than saying more. And listening is always a great idea. So listen actively and empathetically. And it's okay to repeat what you've heard as a confirmation. We call that active listening. So use those techniques when dealing with people. Dealing with people is important and is part of the soft skills. A little fun fact or a little takeaway for you is that in an emergency, just realize that if someone makes a statement, you can always say that's good to know. And if they ask you a question that's difficult to answer, or you might not even know how to answer it, you just answer, that's hard to say. Anyway, I found that very useful. I found one successful developer. I used to speak to him and I always thought that I might be talking above his head, and all he did is kept asking questions. Is that right? Is that right? Maybe I was just boring him to tears, but these are all real pieces of advice I'm trying to give you. And I'm going to take a moment here and talk about, use this word cloud, which I built off of a green buildings career map. And Drew, I don't know if you want to share in the chat. There should be a link in the PowerPoint, or maybe I can pass it on in a moment. The chat may not translate well, but
yeah, it's a great resource.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm happy to put it in the chat, and we'll also put it in the description of the YouTube video. The careers map is a great resource, so thank you for sharing that.
Right, and at the bottom here, I think it's cut off, but you have to go, you can Google Green Buildings Career Map, and the top hit is just that. It's a website that walks you through all the different career choices that relate to green buildings. And I took a little time, I built a spreadsheet and pulled all of the words off of that website, dropped them into a list, and then had them go through the word cloud algorithm that generates this display, sizing the word based on its occurrence in the green building career map. I hope they don't mind. I didn't ask permission, but I think I have the right. And you'll see there's a bunch of words that pop up, and those words should, some of them should ring true to you as something you might want to be or do, and some may have no meaning to you at all, in which case you just don't go down that road necessarily, or realize that there's maybe a gap in your knowledge for which a little time spent on Google or spending time in a course would be a good idea. But you'll see that the different job titles show up prominently, whether you're a contractor, inspector, or manager. Engineer is highlighted, and I found that my background in engineering was a huge help in my job progression. You have to decide what venue or type of place you want to work. Do you want a commercial setting, working with commercial buildings, or are you more comfortable dealing with residential scale building? Those are an important question when it comes to energy efficiency work. And then there's different skill sets kind of hidden in there, whether it's understanding automation, the ability to do sales or be a draftsperson. There's evaluator or raters that are in there. Do you want to be an apprentice? Do you want to go through an apprentice type system to learn the trade, or are you okay with learning it and kind of stepping in and learning on the job, trial by fire, so to speak? So there's different approaches that you can use, and this career map is a really good resource that we'll share for you, or you can certainly search it. So these are just some of the things that I thought I would advise you on. I think also, if you're in the trades, and since this is a calling all trades, I'm going to assume that the audience has tradespeople involved. You're probably a person of action. You prefer doing to studying or, analyzing, that sort of thing. So you tend to be a person of action. And while you might be a white or what we call a green collar worker, which is sort of a blend of white and blue collar these days, you're probably focused more on knowledge and having a knowledge base. Knowledge, of course, can be replaced pretty quickly by the internet. So I've always had a great affinity for those that are people of action. And I think where the worlds collide is this environment that requires a mutual respect from those that are doing and those that are knowing. And I think that's one thing you should strive for in your career growth, is always look for an environment of mutual respect, where you respect both those above you and those that come in under you to learn from you. So I'd say those are just some of my bits of advice for moving forward, especially as we see all of this infrastructure money spent and creating a whole new set of industries tied to climate action and green building. And then my last bit of advice, my last slide, is something I learned a long time ago, and that is this little technique you might need. If during or after the interview, all of a sudden you're presented with a salary offer. In other words, they want to give you the job, and it's a salary that's it's just bigger than you've ever dreamed. So I'm just to pick out the $96,000 a year. I hope that's a lot of people for most of the audience to keep this interesting. Keep those emotions in check as you consider that. And the advice that I read was to count to 30 in your head. Don't say it out loud, of course. And just so you're basically taking a nice long pause. And if they haven't broken the silence by the time that, by suggesting added salary or perks to that number, then they're probably at least wondering what you think. And that's a good time to just say it's worth considering. A little bit of a poker face needed here, but then, that's a good time to ask for that extra week vacation or some other health benefits or whatever you might need. So that's a dream that I thought I'd give you going forward, because when you get that salary offer, of course, I don't know about you, but having as many jobs as I've had in the past, it's always been a nice kick, a little bit of help. So I'll pass it on back to you, Drew. Here, I'll stop sharing and we can open up for questions, answers, and if there's anything else you wanted to ask me, about sort of my growth progression in my job.
Well, first of all, thank you. That was such a great introduction. And I thought you ended it really beautifully when you were talking about people of action, people of knowledge. And it's most amazing when the worlds collide and there's mutual respect. And I just thought that was a really beautiful way to get things done and work well with your team and others. So thank you for that great introduction to the job market and the huge amount of money that's going to be coming down from the federal government with respect to infrastructure. Here in California, green buildings is a topic that is brought up at least every 3 years from the state government, with building efficiency standards and for new construction and the existing building stock. Obviously, there are a lot of old buildings that need retrofits. So I'm glad to see that there's going to be a lot of dollars coming that way and a lot of new jobs. Maybe we can get into some of these sectors a little bit more specifically. And for folks that are interested in, let's start with solar. When people that aren't so familiar with the industry, when they think solar jobs, maybe they're thinking of men or women up on the roof installing solar panels. But I've learned over the years that the solar industry is much more than that. To develop a project or even to get those people up on the roofs takes a lot of front end work. Can you describe maybe maybe there's the top 3 sort of jobs in solar? I can think of maybe sales and development and maybe design engineering and installation. And maybe there's a 4th one, operations and maintenance or monitoring.
No, you named them.
Those 4?
You got them right off the bat. Yeah, and I don't know that there's any order. We do think of installation first because that's the action, that's the actual construction. And of course, behind those scenes, there are a few jobs like warehousing and being able to ready the trucks before they roll. So you may never leave the solar company's building itself because you're preparing all the crews to go out there and be successful in their building of the solar and to be able to build at speed, because we're trying to deploy solar at breakneck speeds here so that we can fight climate change quickly. So some solar companies can build up to 3 different residential installations in one day, and that's with a team of 4. So that's, to me, that's a crazy speed, given that it's usually 2 days to install a solar installation on a residential roof. But that gives you the idea of what kind of pace change there is.
And preparation. And there's probably a sports metaphor here about a team, practicing on the field as to how to most efficiently prepare your equipment and practice with your tools and measure out roofs and move equipment around. So once you get to the site, you do it really quickly.
Right. I mean, I use the word warehouse. Essentially, there's a whole industry called logistics. And if you're not familiar with it, you can realize that if all you're doing now is packing trucks or working in a warehouse, with maintenance of the different materials, that itself has a science behind it called logistics. And you can get a lot smarter in logistics, as we learned last week on this very program. So that's another one. Design is an important one. If you like to draw and you have some skills or quick study when it comes to computer aided drafting and design, design of solar is something that needs to happen ahead of time. Those designs need to go and be permitted. So there's jobs tied to solar in the city governments that look over these permits and make sure that they're meeting code. There's even a job called a permit runner, where all you do is spend the time at the permit office, making sure that those designs get to the right people, get approved, and you can answer and be the go-between. And so you have to be able to speak all the languages between installers, designers, and the city for that to work. Sales is a great opportunity, both marketing and sales of solar. Sales can often be the higher ticket if what you really want is money. Learning about sales of solar is important, but you will find quickly that sales of solar also requires a little bit of financial understanding, because many solar systems are sold on credit or through what are called power purchase agreements. And once you learn that, you can move into the commercial sales world. That's where the big bucks are. So there's a whole lot of different things you can pursue in the solar industry. I'm not sure that, have I addressed all of the ones you mentioned? I think so.
Well, maybe you didn't address, well, I guess you did address installation, with discussion about the warehousing, preparing equipment, and being able to work quickly once you know what you're doing. And then I think there's probably a new field come down the line with respect to operations and maintenance of solar. It's hard to say, but probably with big utility scale systems.
Right. Well, troubleshooting and repair is, a huge concern. A lot of times solar goes up, but people just don't really maintain it because it's fairly maintenance free. It doesn't mean it's totally maintenance free. And so you need to be that person that can advise people to keep the performance of systems up. In fact, cleaning a solar system is one of the most basic maintenance steps. And one of my students was a window washer who wanted to get into the solar market and learned that his window washing skills could be morphed into a solar washing skill, and now has a business that does solar panel washing, and it's been more successful than his window washing business ever could be. So that's actually another bit of advice I'd want to give people, is that if you're looking, you think to yourself, you're looking for a job in green building, realize that green building is going to find its way, or sustainability better yet, will find its way into almost every career out there. And so where you're at right now, if you are employed, consider bringing sustainability and bringing some of the knowledge that you have about climate action to your employer, and you can be the voice of reason in the firm and rise within your own firm to bring about change and bring about improvements to the environment.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think new positions have been created for sure within the last few years. And who knows what new positions will be created in the next few years.
Right. And I want to add one thing, is that there is a job called a Chief Sustainability Officer. And it's in what they call the C-suite, right? In there with the chief financial officers and the chief executive officers. So you're talking about the person in charge. And yet those CSOs, as they're called, are often people that have risen from inside the firm and have just been focused on environmental issues and constantly thinking about it. So they are the best people to answer and to fill those positions. And that is sort of like a rapid rise track for someone looking to get into high level, high paid positions in sustainability.
Yeah, are there any other careers that you'd like to focus on? Maybe we could touch on energy efficiency a bit, and maybe the building retrofit space, or electric vehicle infrastructure. It's up to you. What would you like to talk about next? And maybe we could talk about like a typical day in the life of some of these workers, and also sort of what skills employers look for when recruiting.
Well, that's a good question and a tough question, because I've wrestled with this for years. Energy efficiency is not something, for example, that's offered much in college. It's not a subject area that you can easily just point a finger at and say, that's what energy efficiency looks like. It requires a lot of different skill set. I found that it took me a whole career to learn, for example, years studying lighting to understand everything about the lighting world, years studying HVAC systems and studying engineering to understand the actual mechanical workings of an air conditioning system or of a heat pump water heater system. And something like a heat pump water heater is just one technology of many that we're going to see coming about and becoming much more important in the years to come. So if you did nothing but pick one technology or even one topic area and focused just on that, there's a really good chance that you have quite a career ahead of you. You don't need to be a master of all of these. You just need to be laser focused on one and really get it and understand it fully. And for example, lighting's not going away. The need for comfort in buildings is not going away. So these areas are going to stay quite robust when it comes to the job markets of the future. And so being really smart, again, knowing what you need to know in the field rather than being something is probably a better way to go. So the HVAC technicians, for example, but usually an HVAC technician, that requires some formal study. Even with my mechanical engineering degree, a master's level, that doesn't teach me the hands-on of what to do when I'm in front of a chiller system in a commercial building. So I really need to have that on the ground understanding of these systems to be able to do well. And so I have always applauded and always enjoyed when I can learn on the job or in place where there's these actual systems being built, because there is just so much out there and so many different places you can specialize in. And I encourage you to go down a rabbit hole, see if you like it. And, you know, maybe that's all you need and you've got a career for decades.
That's such great advice. And I realized the question I asked you was so broad, you know, energy efficiency jobs, but I thought you answered that so well by recommending to folks looking at getting into this burgeoning world of green building and energy retrofits to focus on a particular technology or sector within the building sphere and get really good at it and become a specialist in it. One sort of obstacle that I found in my work with the city, talking to residents who want to retrofit their own homes, for example, is if they want to do a heat pump water heater, electric heat pump water heater, but they have a gas existing water heater, who do they call? Do they call an electrician or a plumber? And I'm finding that, you know, it kind of requires some skills in both electrical and plumbing to make that kind of retrofit. And I don't think anyone, or at least many local companies, have cornered that market. So I think there's a huge opportunity for heat pump water heater specialists and just building electrification specialists. And maybe that's a new company with a few different specialists under one company umbrella that can do a whole building electrification project.
I totally agree that it's very difficult to find a contractor that has that skill set. So in many cases, if you're looking for a job, become that contractor. When you recognize a niche in the market that needs filling, that's a good time for you to become the expert on the system. As someone who just remodeled a home, I found that I was doing most of the educating with the contractors because most of this technology is new to them. So new ideas, even though they've been around for a while, there's plenty of information out there. We can't expect every tradesperson to understand every nuance of every technology that's in this world. So we really need to take it upon ourselves. And then once you take it upon yourself, you become the expert and you can often guide the contractor in the right direction, get them the right materials, you know, insist on the right approaches. And that I think raises all boats in the sense. So I like that analogy.
Thank you, Stuart. We're almost 40 minutes in. I'd love to open it up for questions. See, Domi has his hand raised. Do you want to unmute and ask Stuart a question? And then I've got more for after.
Thank you, Drew. And hello, Stewart. Thank you. Stewart was my professor at Santa Monica College and started me on the way of photovoltaics. Thank you very much. So I have a question. This kind of launches off of what Drew was talking about. Do you see the industry evolving? Because as we've all discussed and studied, I mean, now it's becoming a situation where you need to know a lot of different things. I mean, in the early days of solar, it was like, yeah, it could be an installer and you know, hook things into power, you could do stuff. But now there's battery technology, there's, you know, all kinds of other, you know, things to think about. Where do you see that going? Like in solar design and, you know, just integration, and do you see all that evolving more? I mean, like what you were talking about, Drew, is like, is there a new class of companies possibly coming, or do we need to start thinking of other companies, like maybe like a bigger company, like a Tesla's, solar program, where it's larger and you have all these different kinds of trades that can come in and deal with these things and integrate. So, yeah,
there's a lot of disruption with technology in all of the different industries. You cited a good example is Battery storage is now finding its way into solar installations, and in many cases, part and parcel to a solar installation. And yet that still is sort of a disconnect. At the city level, they don't have it, streamlined. Most contractors, I would say, are probably not familiar with battery technology in general. And battery technology is, because it's dropping in price so quickly, it also means that technologies are being overrun one after the other. And so getting too early into the industry, you may end up buying yourself something that is somewhat dated by the time it goes in. So you want to use caution. I'm using caution in terms of moving into this marketplace. It's bitten me, even though I've been studying this for years, because I'm knowledgeable of new technologies, doesn't necessarily mean that all those new technologies are easy, ready to go, just a matter of picking it off the shelf. It requires this whole network and ecosystem of contractors that are knowledgeable for it to move forward. So I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I've come across the same thing. I mean, since being in class with you, I mean, just looking at photovoltaic modules and things like that, I mean, prices are going down. Like I was going to put them in my garage. I was like, well, let me just wait a little longer, or, the inverters being built into the modules and, all kinds of things like that. So, it just seems like a really fluid moment right now.
Financially, it doesn't make sense to wait because it's always a good investment to do something now. But do it carefully, because it's not so much the investment of the technology that is going to fail you. It may be the systems around it and the ability to install it properly, for example. So you just need to be your own best advocate when it comes to making sure all of these technologies go in the right way. But there's, the solar industry has been around long enough that most of those kinks have been worked out. And so, plain vanilla solar installations are straightforward. Arguably batteries, if you choose the right technology and that company is doing the installation itself, it's going to go pretty smoothly. It's when we have to build around all of these systems, and certainly be aware of what works in your locality. California has a very open government and system in terms of helping these things move along. But in other states, I imagine you're going to be a lone voice advocating for these, environmentally friendly technologies, at least for a while. So until that infrastructure bill is passed and everyone sort of, moves up, rises to the occasion, I think we're going to have a little bit of friction. Of course, that to me is a job opportunity. Again, an ability for you as a smart learner to step up, learn the system, and then get involved in its proper installation.
That's a great advice for folks if they're interested in joining the sector, green building sector, solar, energy efficiency, et cetera. Take the initiative. And there are a lot of great resources on the internet from reputable organizations about renewable energy. And maybe you could share some of those with us today. And do you have advice for folks that want to have a more formal education with some of the local community colleges, or maybe companies offer apprenticeships? So what are some of the resources for folks who want to get a more formal education?
Well, I am gratified to know, and I'm wearing the colors today, Santa Monica College t-shirt. The college is hiring part-time instructors in renewable and solar, and also energy efficiency again. So that's a good sign that the program is going to bounce back after this COVID shortcoming, if you will. And so that's good news. LA Trade Tech has a number of programs that are geared in that area as well. I imagine they're going to start ramping up again. College of the Desert is a nice community. College of the Canyons. East LA Skills Center is a adult learning school, so it's not technically college, but it's great if you want to do the hands-on and learning about installation of solar, and you've got that sort of hands-on mentality. That's a great place to go. So there's a number of different places that offer the training specifically to solar. To energy efficiency, a little tougher to find. I mentioned College of the Desert. maybe not geographically desirable for some of us in the LA area, but that's one. And as Drew mentioned, there's online resources that are good to find. Everblue, Heatspring. These aren't endorsements necessarily, but these are things that I've seen out there, and I've always been impressed with their outreach materials. So I have a pretty good feeling that they're doing a good job. But those are just a few. If you want an experience, there's a few places that you relocate geographically for a number of days. One is called Solar Living Institute in Northern California, where they do hands-on training of solar. And then there's Solar Energy International, located both in Colorado, and I believe they have a training in the North Carolina area. And so you make a trip of it and you spend a number of days and you come back that much smarter in a whole new industry. So those are, almost camp-like ways of learning about these new technologies.
That sounds super cool.
Were those the ones you were expecting, Drew, or did you have some others in mind?
No, yeah, you hit on a lot of them that I was expecting. Obviously, SMC, that was a softball for you. But yeah, the experiential learning sounds super cool. I would love to do that one day. Does anyone else have any questions? Mike, Domi, or Michael?
I had a question. It's not exactly covered, but one of the things I've been concerned about is the whole concept of the new technologies as related to the whole carbon footprint notion, about how that I believe we all need to be more aware of, taking on new technologies means throwing away something, or some version, or the energy involved in creating a battery, the whole controversy about the lithium to make batteries and where it comes from. And anyhow, is that appropriate to have a few words about the
No, that's a very appropriate thing to do. I mean, the future is coming a lot quicker for us. And so some of the things down the road that we don't think about that should be thought about now, for example, is just that. For example, disposal of either lithium batteries or at end of life, or in fact, solar modules, which are going out there in great numbers. There's no real strategy for what to do at the end of their life. And so that's an opportunity. That's one of those niches that if you become that person that knows how these things can be recycled best or reused first and cascaded in some sort of down cycle system so that they're not thrown away, because their chances are they're still working at 25 years, which is considered end of life, but they're still functional. How can we use them? Can we use them in training? Can we use them in different, less critical applications? Those kinds of things. And then if you, in fact, you do want to basically remove it, and how do we recycle it? What materials are reusable? Which ones are actually hazardous now? Because a lot of the solar panels that went out included cadmium, tellurium, which are one exotic, expensive metal and one poisonous one. So we've blended these things and put them out there, and we really need to address them if we're going to really address environmental issues in the long run. So that's a really good question. And then I do want to mention one other idea. You were talking about the energy to create things. It's called embodied energy. So there's a Google word for someone out there. But the embodied energy is the energy that goes into manufacturing a product. And that can be a substantial carbon footprint itself. So one thing in the green building world we've realized is all of the concrete. When we build with concrete, we figure, oh, we're just using stone. We're not using anything harmful. But as a matter of fact, the cement that holds concrete aggregate together actually releases carbon dioxide and continues to as it cures. And so it's a huge carbon footprint. And so there are alternatives and companies that are addressing that, ways of making concrete in different ways. So many industries are being turned on their head and being asked to come up with innovation and invention and new ideas. So there's no shortage of that. of that need?
Yeah, great question. And back to the solar panel recycling discussion, I'm really excited that the city of Santa Monica was awarded a $50,000 grant from CalRecycle to pilot a residential solar panel recycling program. And until very recently, there was just no place to send solar panels for recycling. No one was really touching them. They were landfilled, unfortunately. But there have been a couple companies that had history in e-waste recycling that have sort of taken on this challenge. And we're going to launch this pilot program in a couple weeks. And so if we get any panels collected, we're not sure what the need is yet, but if we have panels collected, we're contracted with the California Conservation Corp and a company called CalMicro. And there's apparently a processor up near Sacramento. And so any panels that can't be reused will be sent up there for sort of, they have to mechanically take them apart, separate the aluminum, the glass, the back sheet, any of the precious metals, and then process it from there. So it can be very time and labor intensive to sort of decommission a solar panel. So they're working on automation and special machines to be able to do it. So it's an industry that I think will grow a lot. Europe is way ahead of us in this regard. They have producer responsibilities. They have a small fee, for every solar panel. So in 25 years, theoretically, there'll be some sort of trust fund that will be used to recycle those panels. And the state of Washington also has some legislation. So yeah, we're just starting to tackle that now. It's going to be really fascinating next few years.
Well, that's great, Drew. And that's just like the city of Santa Monica to be at the forefront of some of these new ideas. I would hope that they work with Santa Monica College and train students at the same time you're learning, have students be involved in learning this and realizing the future of an industry that's obviously going to have to be huge. The question is, are people willing to, put the time in now to learn it, do it correctly, so that in 10 and 20 years, when the numbers really grow to be huge in terms of need for panel recycling, that we're ready for it.
Yeah, and that's one of the exciting things about this pilot is that we'll be collecting a lot of data with respect to the types of panels collected, the age, and where they were taken from, and what it's going to be like to process. And I'd be happy to share that information. That's the whole point of this pilot, is to share with other cities and states about lessons learned in starting a solar panel recycling program.
Well, that's great. I hope it brings more money to it, though. It doesn't sound like a very big budget for what solution it's solving. I mean, it could be a much bigger effort. So maybe some of that infrastructure money is, where that training can take place. So, hope. Tommy, did you want to go ahead? I think you're still on.
Yeah, since we have you, and just to discuss different points. This is more future oriented. Two things. Can you discuss a little things about utility scale solar? Like, I was just up in the Mojave Desert and just looking at some of the solar fields that are out there, and especially us in the LA area and Southern California area. Is that a solution to just set out panels out in the desert? I mean, can we actually just power our cities? I remember in your class, discussing if we just put modules over a bit of land the size of Massachusetts or something, I think it could power the whole United States. And we have a giant desert out there. And then the second thing is on storage. This is also future oriented too. Do you see also any linkage between, if we went away from lithium, what if we created hydrogen, hydrolyzing water, and can we use that as a storage system? So we use the solar energy to split, water and just end up with hydrogen. Do you see anything in there?
Well, two big questions there.
Yeah, and I figured we got you, so.
Sure. My take on the utility scale solar is that the utilities are doing what they're being asked to do, which is generate electricity in a low cost way. And solar just dropped in that price to the point where they're doing it. Now, the fact of the matter is it's dropped to the point where you can put it on your own roof, or you as a business owner can put it on your own building and make most, if not all, of the electricity yourself. Now, the utility is a quasi-public entity, right? It's it's what they call a natural monopoly. So we don't want too many utilities competing with each other for the job. But the fact of the matter is, now that that job is democratized to be on every roof, is it really the best answer to put them out in the desert? If you're anyone who's an advocate for deserts, you realize that even solar energy has a huge impact on ecosystems there, and we probably shouldn't be doing this. But if we're going to rely on utilities, as we have in the past, for our electricity, then I think the utilities are wise to be doing the investment in the deserts where there's a solar resource, where there's low-cost land, and where they can ship to nearby city centers with minimal losses of transmission. But we shouldn't have to suffer those losses of transmission at all if we all just agreed that these should be on our rooftops. So these are philosophical questions. I don't necessarily want to be the one to answer. I'm of the mind that people like to be in control of their own destiny, which includes their own utilities. And so I like to think that it belongs as part of the construction process to go on rooftops. So that answers that, I hope. It's just, it's an open question. On the storage side, lithium batteries are the most common form of energy storage currently, but hydrogen is another energy carrier which can be stored safely, though it does require some technological development to build, you know, the proper pressure vessels and that sort of thing, because you need to contain it in a pressurized form. And so those should be pursued. They should be incorporated where they make sense economically. It is an option in the future. And I just have a feeling that, you know, lithium has the jump on things now and is the low cost leader, fairly safe, though those questions arise on, you know, lithium catching fire and that sort of thing. So it is still in debate whether those different forms of storage are going to have a place moving forward, and if they have a place at your home or not, that's yet another question. So all good questions, all part of the adventure as we move forward with these technologies.
Thank you.
I knew. Sorry, Don, were you done? No.
Yeah, I said thank you.
Sorry.
I said thank you. No, I said thank you.
Oh, okay. Stuart, I wanted to ask you a question which really started off from the beginning. Looking at your resume, which had, you know, different, you know, timelines, but really the back end of it, like what you're engaging with now, like as semi-retired, however you view this next chapter in your life, what are the things that you're doing with now that kind of, you know, keeps your juices flowing for this, you know, you know?
Well, I just figure I have, yeah, thanks for the question. I have a lot of knowledge in energy. I mean, I started at age 14 to be the energy, you know, guru, if you will, to know everything there was to know about energy. And so here at this ripe old age, I'm not going to admit to. I am looking to see where I'm best suited to help with the cause of climate action and energy efficiency moving forward. Is it at the Santa Monica College, continuing to teach part-time? Is it with the U.S. Green Building Council, where I'm on the board of directors of the LA chapter? Is it working with SOMA, which is something I'm involved in, a joint task force looking at workforce development specifically to solar on affordable multifamily housing? So there's all different places that I can go. So I have that question that many people ask is, what do I want to be or what do I want to do? And I'm going to go ahead and add when I grow up, because there's so much new happening right now that anything I had in the past is kind of old school. So I'm constantly looking at other things that I need to learn about. In fact, I'm taking a Python course currently, learning about computer programming language I've never learned before. I'm learning also Unity, a computer program that ties to virtual reality, because I see virtual reality as being a mode of teaching in the future, especially for teaching trades related work, because more and more what you see as a game today, virtual reality games, is going to be the way we train people in terms of how to deal with manufacturing setups. How are we going to recycle Drew's solar panels, those kinds of things. Those are all, mechanistic things that we can do and that require knowledge of computers so that we can learn it and do it safely in a simulated environment before we put people in harm's way in doing it for real. Or maybe we just have robots doing it and we just do it humanly first and to work out the kinks. So there's all kinds of new technology out there. I'm not dead yet, so I might as well get involved as much as I can in training and helping people going forward and helping the world in, as a consultant in the meantime as well. So thanks for that question.
Thanks for the answer.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, I mean, we're at 2 o'clock. It's been an hour. This hour has flown by. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing you speak and answer questions, Stuart. You're a natural speaker and teacher, so I'm very glad you're very much alive and very much staying engaged in this topic, in this sector, and it's an honor to have you. Do you have any other closing statements before we go?
No, I just, wish the best for anyone who's looking to, get involved, is to follow your passion. I showed that word cloud, figure out what words are kind of important in your future. And when it comes to looking for a job, blend some of those sustainability words that we shared on the screen with words that mean something to you, right? Throw that word gaming in with sustainability and see what comes up, for example. That's something maybe I should do because I'm interested in seeing, these new applications of game technology being applied to the learning world of sustainability. So the world is your oyster. I don't know what that means, but I think it's a good thing.
Thank you, Stuart.
Big oyster. Thank you so much, Stuart. And thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Bye.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you all.